It never ends. I had dared to believe in a moment of weakness as the Inquisitor's boot found my skull that it would. I should have known better. I do now. When I awoke, my head throbbed and my soul burned. For a second moment of hope, I was unafraid for the first time I could remember. Then I realized it never ends. The hell I had known for all my life was gone, replaced by a new one. She looked down at me in her golden armor, the first fully human face I can remember seeing. Her visage was stern, her features an all too familiar mix of pity and disgust. But that was all. There was nothing behind the eyes. The evil everyone else carried was not there. I longed to stare into those icy eyes, and for a moment, I did. I endured the fire they poured into my soul for the chance to see eyes untainted. She blinked and struck me with her gauntlet, causing me to fall back to my knees. She motioned and more of the Golden Women silently grabbed me and pulled me from the queue. A device was placed around my neck, and the world was gone. When I awoke, I was alone. The small room was cold. When it wasn't dark, it strobed with light. When it wasn't silent, a siren wailed. My head still throbbed, and if I thought too hard, the collar around my neck shocked me back into unconsciousness. I cannot say how long I lay in that room, as the meager rations caused me to forget. One day, I found myself being carried from my cell through the halls of the ship. I saw the hold stuffed with human cargo. Some of them were crying, others screaming. A few sat quietly rocking themselves back and forth while others lay motionless on the floor. For just a moment, my clouded eyes saw him in the mass. It was the boy from the farm. He stared, anger filling his small face, his will unbroken. I caught only a glimpse, and he faded back into the dejected crowd. The hold seemed to go on forever as I was dragged along. By the time we reached a large door, I had come to my senses enough to stand. I looked at my jailers. One was some human-machine hybrid with dead eyes, its face a rictus of pain, red and swollen where the flesh met the metal. It hummed quietly and tremored slightly as it moved to the door control. The other was the woman in golden armor with the ice-blue eyes that poured fire into my mind. I did my best to meet them, but she looked away in disgust as the door opened. I was pushed through by the woman in gold as soon as the opening was large enough for me to fit. The door wasted no time closing behind me. I found myself in an empty white room devoid of any features. The door behind me left no seam, no hint that it was ever there. I waited to see what new fate awaited me. Time passed. It may have been minutes or hours. It was impossible to say in the featureless white world I inhabited. I did not pace. I did not explore. I stood and I waited. At the other end of the room, far closer than my mind had perceived the featureless wall to be, an opening appeared. Through it stepped a man in purple robes. He limped slightly, and his haggard face was bruised with several fresh cuts that had been hastily attended to. I knew that face. It was the man from the farm, the man who had sent me here. He had an authority about him that made it impossible for me to meet his eye. "Do you have a name?" he asked, his voice deep and rough. I shook my head, still looking at the ground. While I could not sense his mind as I could before, I knew this place pained him as much as it did me. "I thought not. I am Inquisitor Aldred. You shall refer to me as Inquisitor. When I first saw you, I thought you a wolf. I see now that you are a dog. And like a dog, you can be made useful." He paused for a moment before continuing. "Yes, dog. That is what I shall call you." He did not say the words with venom, but as a simple statement of fact. Dog, look at me. I looked up and met his gaze. I will give you a choice. Do you wish to serve me and do the Emperor's will? Or do you wish to find out what fate awaits you on that ship? I paused for a moment, dumbstruck that I would be given a choice. My voice trembled, but I fought to control it. I will serve you. I will serve the Emperor. The Emperor protects. I croaked out through parched lips. The Inquisitor's face bent fractionally into what I would learn passed for a smile. Good. This world has not been kind to me. Come, dog. You will need to be trained. The Inquisitor turned and the door opened. I followed him out into his ship. He showed me to a small door. These are your quarters. Clean yourself up. Your state offends me. Without another word, the Inquisitor left me to the small room. Within, I found a bed, a toilet, a sink, and shower. Hanging on the wall was an unadorned grey robe. I stripped the soiled rags hanging from my body and found a small opening to dispose of them. When I looked into the mirror, I saw myself for the first time. Rust-colored eyes stared back, sat deeply within a wild mane of dark hair. My body was little more than pale skin wrapped tightly around hard, wiry muscles and bones. The collar fit snugly around my thin neck. I found a blade waiting on the sink and began to remove the long, tangled mess of dark hair. As the hair fell away, a square face with thin features was revealed. Small creases lined my eyes, but my pale skin was smoother than I had expected. I stepped into the shower and luxuriated under the cold water for the allotted minute. Warm air blew down on me as the water ceased, leaving me only slightly wet. I donned the grey robe and sat on the bed, waiting. After some time, the door slid open and another one of the human-machine hybrids deposited a bowl of what I guessed was food onto the floor. I reached for the food and began to eat. It was nearly tasteless, with the consistency and colour of mud. It filled my belly and little more. With nothing else to do, I lay on the bed and closed my eyes. I was awakened by a boot in my ribs. Get up, dog. We have much to do. The Inquisitor stood over me, his weathered features serious. The cuts had closed and were easily lost in the maze of lines and scars. My training began that day. We entered a chamber that smelled of incense. The Inquisitor removed my collar and commanded me to do things, his hand never leaving his pistol. I did not understand or even see how some of the tasks were possible. He never chastised me for my failures in these exercises. He would only grunt occasionally and command me to do the next task. The Inquisitor opened a door, and a small animal walked out. Faster than I could follow, he fired his pistol into the animal. I flinched at the sound, but stood as I had been commanded to do. Keep the animal alive. He motioned me towards the animal with his pistol. Yes, master, I replied, relieved that I would be able to complete the task. His empty hand struck my face as quick as a snake. You aren't to call me Inquisitor. Anyone can be a master. Few are worthy to be an Inquisitor, he said in a flat tone. Yes, Inquisitor, I responded, the pain of the correction dwarfing the sting of his hand. I approached the animal as it twitched on the floor. I could see the light quickly fading from it. I placed my hands on it and willed the wound to close. The animal ceased twitching and lay still, its breathing shallow. The Inquisitor made a knowing sound before ordering me to return to him. He inhaled and closed his eyes. I could feel power building within him. He pointed at the animal, and a single ray of blue light jumped from his finger, turning the animal to ash. You have much to learn, dog. He placed the collar back around my neck and made a motion with his hand. A servitor walked clumsily towards us, holding a small book. "Can you read?" he asked, as he grabbed the small book. I truly did not know. I told him as much. "Take the book and try. You must learn of the Emperor. When you are not training, you should be praying." He motioned me towards my quarters and left. His limp was nearly gone. I held the book in my hands as if it was the most precious item in the galaxy. I did not sleep that night as I struggled to decipher the text. With much effort, I learned of the Emperor and his will. The following days, the routine continued. The Inquisitor would train me. I would do as I was commanded. Running, lifting, fighting. When I was not training, I would read my book and pray to the Emperor. When I could no more, I would sleep. My sleep offered no reprieve as I dreamed of the Inquisitor. He would appear sometimes alongside dark creatures and I would try to flee. My exhausted legs would move as if they were made of stone. On these nights I would awaken, drenched in sweat, trying to scream for the Emperor's protection. Other nights he would appear bathed in a golden light that burned the darkness away. On these occasions I would awaken, shaking, feeling as if I was on fire. I was happy. The collar attenuated the evil of the world and I had a purpose. I always knew what I must do. I must do as the Inquisitor commanded and all would be right. Despite the exhaustion, despite the bruises, I felt, well, dare I say, nearly human. My ribs no longer stood out through my robes. My muscles no longer looked like ropes pulled too tightly over my bones. I should have known that it never ends. "I have a use for you, dog." The Inquisitor prodded me with his boot to get me out of bed. I stood as quickly as my aching muscles would allow. "Eat. You will need your strength." The Inquisitor turned and left. A bowl of food waited for me by the door to my small room. I began to eat, finding chunks of meat in the normally tasteless meal. This unexpected boon caused a knot to form in my stomach. As I entered the training room, I found the Inquisitor waiting next to the largest man I have ever seen. He stood head and shoulders above the already tall Inquisitor, and at least twice as broad. The giant looked down at me. His heavily tattooed face was unreadable. "This is Isaac. You are to follow him and do as he tells you." The Inquisitor walked over to me and placed his hand on my shoulder. I held my head a little higher, spirit buoyed by the touch. "Remove your collar. You will not need it, although you may wish for it. You must not despair." The Inquisitor stepped back. I hesitated before reaching up to find the collar. I was surprised to find that it was not locked. My hands trembled slightly as I pulled it from my neck. I winced as the other world asserted its presence. "To despair is to lose faith," I respond shakily. The aurora of power around the Inquisitor glowed. I turned to look at the giant and nearly collapsed. The tattoos on his face radiated darkness. Evil exuded from the giant. His mind was like steel, cold and hard. I catch only a glimpse of his thoughts before he turned to me and his mind slammed shut, nearly knocking me over. The Inquisitor saw my reaction. "What do you know to be true above all other things?" He barked the words like a command. "The Emperor protects," I respond reflexively. The words dimmed the darkness around the giant slightly. "I will come for you. Both of you." The Inquisitor looked at both of us before leaving. The giant pointed towards a bag on the floor. I went to pick it up and struggled with the weight. A door opened and the giant walked towards it. I followed him, body bowed beneath the weight of his bag. As we left the ship, an unfamiliar planet greeted me. The air smelled of sulfur and the gravity was slightly too heavy. I looked up to find that our ship rested beneath a steel sky. Towers stretched off into the distance, obscured by the polluted air. My lungs burned as I took my first breath of the world's air. Millions of souls inhabited those towers. Their minds radiated a quiet desperation. Beneath the surface of the world, the despair turned into fear, then into lust. Lust for power, lust for blood, and darker things. In my mind, I repeated litanies to the Emperor to give me courage. The giant, Isak, marched forward, long legs propelling him at a speed I needed to run to keep up with. We made our way deeper into the city. As we descended, the air grew more foul and the world grew darker. I could feel the evil lurking deeper into the city. As my legs reached the limits of their endurance, Isak stopped. His large head swiveled back and forth far above me. He reached out one enormous hand to me, and I lifted the heavy bag on shaky arms to him. Without a sound, he effortlessly relieved me of the bag. From within, he produced a small stone. As it touched his hand, it glowed with ethereal light. I could feel the energies around us begin to swirl. Isak began to chant quietly, causing the vortex of energy around us to intensify. As the energy became unbearable, there was a great flash of light, and the world around us disappeared. Colors and sounds, real and unreal, began to swirl, up and down, black and white. Self and other began to flow freely into one another. Within the turbulent sea, I sought reason. I sought the light. As soon as my mind found it, an unchanging point of golden light within the chaos, it was gone. I found myself face down on a smooth, stone floor.
"Get up, dog,"
Isak rumbled, his voice matching his mountainous form. I struggled to my feet only to be nearly flattened as he returned the heavy bag. We had appeared in a large chamber that resonated with power. At the center of the chamber sat 9 granite blocks carved with symbols that glowed with the same dark energies that Isak did. He walked towards one of the blocks and I followed. As we approached, balls of light flashed in the distance. Giants like Isak appeared, each with a man following them. The minds of the giants were as unreadable as Isak's. Their charges all radiated malevolent power. I could feel their lust for power overcoming the fear beneath the surface. When we reached the block, Isak held out his hand again and I lifted the bag to it. I watched as he produced items from it, laying them around the block. Each item, 9 in all, glowed with ethereal light, weaving a web of dark energies. As the others reached their block, similar rituals took place. When all of the items had been placed, the charges lay on the blocks. Isak motioned for me to do the same. Swallowing my fear, I did as instructed, the words of my master driving me forward. As I lay on the block, the webs of power entangled me, trapping me. As Isak began to chant, the evil power I had felt earlier grew within the room. The voices of the 9 giant men began to merge into one. The thoughts of the men lying on the granite blocks began to join the chant, followed by a maddening swell of millions of voices in thousands of tongues. Each of the other men in turn spoke words of power before being sacrificed by their giant. As the other 8 died, I saw their souls merge into one. When it came to my turn, Isak drew a glowing sword.
"What do you know to be true, dog?"
he rumbled. He held the sword high to strike me down. I said the only thing I knew to say. The Emperor protects. I said the words with my heart as much as my lips. The stone-faced giant cracked a smile. The aurora around him exploded. The runes etched into his skin flowed with golden light as they morphed into new forms. Blue, ethereal flames raced from his sword to the nearest giant. The remaining giants raged with power. I could feel their will dragging my soul from my body. I could feel the power of the room coalescing in the center. I reached deep within and found the void within me and willed it to expand. As I did, the wall of the chamber exploded and a familiar power emerged, flanked by giants in grey armor. The universe around me turned black. The mayhem around me was gone. It was replaced by a giant entity of pure power. Towering above me was a stooped, winged monster with the head of a bird and the neck of a snake. It leaned on a large, knotted wooden cane. Its massive avian head swiveled on the impossibly long neck. Its high-pitched, bird-like voice echoed in my soul as much as in my ears.
And what are you that has delayed me, little dog?
I said nothing, as there was nothing to say. I focused on the darkness, using all of my will to hold it together. The monster cackled, raising its head. It began to make me offers of power, of knowledge.
I could give you all of the powers your master wants of you. You could be a good little dog. All you need to do is submit to me.
Again, I said nothing. I repeated the holy words my mother taught me as my strength faded.
You are a good little dog, aren't you?
The monster dropped its cane and spread its wings, pulling itself to its full and monstrous height. The wings of the demon twisted and flowed through impossible shapes and colors. The universe around me and within me began to swim and lose its coherence. In the swirling maelstrom, I searched for the rock I knew to be there. As soon as I found that infinitesimal point of golden light anchored in the swirling sea of unreality, the demon lowered its head to me. Its yellow eye appraised me and its pupil dilated. My soul was flayed open. All I was, past, present, and future, was laid bare for the demon. Golden light fountained forth from me, engulfing the head of the demon. The demon screamed a primal scream and reared back. It began to fade from the black void.
Go to your master, little dog.
The cackling voice faded as the demon lost form. I lay back, the effort to remain conscious too much. I awoke laying on the block, smoke still lazily swirling around me. The room was silent. The energies resonating around it were gone. There was no trace of the battle that had been raging moments before. The only evidence was the hole in the wall the Inquisitor and the giant grey armored men had burst through. I shakily got to my feet and headed towards the opening to find the Inquisitor.